Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to episode 2 of the U.S. History GCast as presented by Gibsonian Institute. Today, we will be looking at the overview of the Illinois Constitution. Of course, we're looking at the 1970 edition, as that's the one that we're studying currently, and that is our current Constitution. So, before we get too much involved in this overview of the Illinois Constitution, we first need to open up our Bell Ringer journals as we do have a two-part question to answer for today. Our question today: what are your feelings towards the COVID-19 quarantine, and how are you spending your newly found free time? Remember, there's two questions here, so there should be two separate answers. Curious to see how we're all taking this time that we have now added to our lives that is not spent in the classroom. Hopefully, something productive like picking up a nice hobby. Be interesting to read nevertheless. Now, of course, before we go into too many more details, we need to go over our objectives for today. There are three. Our first one is to enumerate the articles of the Illinois Constitution, enumerate being able to numbers. So there are 14 that we're going to look at specifically. Following that up, we are going to identify and compare the Illinois Bill of Rights and preamble versus the United States versions. There's a lot of similarities, and there's some clear differences that are worth pointing out. And then finally, we're going to classify the voting requirements of our state. Now, as I mentioned in yesterday's episode, today I served as an election judge, so there will be a little bit of kind of storytelling that I can add from my experience today with these objectives, which is very opportunistic considering we're studying the Illinois Constitution, but also specifically with this last objective with the voting requirements for the state. So this should be a unique kind of opportunity that we can bring some outside real world knowledge into practical knowledge into some of the concepts that we're studying. All right, we are going to first begin with the voting requirements. There's going to be four specific things that we're going to list that need to be accomplished in order for a person to vote in the Illinois general election. Now, it should be pointed out that we're specifying for the Illinois general election, the one that occurred today was a primary election. So there is going to be special circumstances that allow different dispensation for people in a primary election versus a general election, and I'll let you know when we're talking about those. But for right now, in general elections, which is the one that get all the publicity in November, these are the requirements. First, you must be a citizen. Now, this doesn't mean you need to be born in the United States. It just simply means that you are a citizen of the United States. Second thing is that you must be 18 years old. We're going to come back to that asterisk mark at the end. You must be an Illinois resident for 30 days. You had to have lived here for at least about a month. And of course, you must be registered to vote in order to, vote. That's pretty standard and straightforward. Now, going back to this asterisk mark with the 18 years old. You must be 18 years old by the general election in order to vote in the general election. Now, in the case of years like 2020 currently, if you are 17 years old at the time of the primary election that takes place in March, you can vote in that primary election provided you will turn 18 by the time of the general election in November. So in the case today, I did have a few high school students that were currently 17 that were able to register and vote today without restrictions because they were going to be 18 by the time November comes around. All right, so just one of those kind of special circumstances that allows for these kind of opportunities. All right, and our last slide here is going to address the articles of the Illinois Constitution. Now, we just established a short time ago that there are 14 articles to it, so we won't go through in great detail all 14, but I'm going to touch upon the important parts that you will need to know. Now, there's going to be a review guide or a exit slip for you to complete after this that will be posted on Google Classroom, so make sure you're following along to this part, but also to the taking good diligent notes, as always, on the previous topics that we've covered. Now, getting started, the first article, of course, is going to be the Bill of Rights. It's to talk about things such as jury trial, religious freedom, access for disabled people. So those are things that you should be able to identify from the Article 1 portion of Bill of Rights. Article 2 will be the power of the state as a whole. Article 3 will discuss suffrage and election. Suffrage, of course, we remember, is the ability or the right to vote. So voting qualifications is going to fall in under that topic. Article 4 will be legislature, which is our upcoming bigger content that we're going to be looking at, probably starting tomorrow. Article 5 will deal with the executive, which in our case will be the governor. Article 6 is going to talk about judiciary, so anything that has to do about judges or the appointment of judges, the election of judges, districts, and all of those finer points that we're going to get into when we get to that section. Article 7, local government, will touch upon kind of the rules that they're allowed to enact as a local government or a municipality. And we'll also look specifically at things such as home rule, which is something that my local town has been voting on. So something that might be able to give you a little bit more context to than normal. Article 8 discusses finance, how revenue and and all those sorts of things are going to be sorted out within the state. Revenue is going to talk specifically about how things are being spent on within the state. Vice versa. Finance will be talking about this expenditure within the state. Revenue is going to be the taxable stuff that's going to be talking about how the money is coming into the state. My apologies there. Article 10, education. So things like public high schools, things that they got to follow, state standards, all those things that kind of guide the educating system that we have. Article 11, environment. It's going to talk about things such as pollution control, lakes, rivers, making sure that everything is up to certain codes and standards. Article 12, militia. The Illinois allows for the establishment of the militia in case the governor decides that there's a need for one. Oftentimes it'll take the form of the state guard, Article 13 is going to be general provisions. It's going to have a whole variety of subjects that are going to be covered, just kind of the leftover things that just weren't addressed by these last 12. And then the last article, Article 14, is going to be looking at constitutional revision, which is going to be done through two ways. Either one, a constitutional convention, in which they will most likely create an entirely new constitution, or of course amendments by the General Assembly that meets in Springfield. Just like how amendments would be added to the U.S. Constitution, amendments can of course be added to the Illinois Constitution. Now, this concludes our notes for today. Make sure that you are checking Google Classroom to make sure that you are completing the exit slip that I just mentioned at the start of the slide. There is going to be two parts to it. There is going to be kind of which article talks about what, but also a little bit of a true-false section. So make sure you get that done and turn it in properly. If you have any questions, make sure that you contact me either via email or on Google Classroom, or of course in the comments section on this video. And goodbye, and look forward to seeing you again soon.